Hey everybody, welcome back to the next part in my dialing in series, and this one's mostly for Pod Go. We're going to be using that today, but it's also going to be for Helix and HX Stomp. What I've decided to do is go back and look at some of the previous dialing in videos I had done that were quite popular for the Helix, and maybe for the HX Stomp as well. There's not as many HX Stomp ones, but and kind of recreate them or come close to recreating them within the limitations of the Pod Go. Now, if we can do it on the Pod Go, we can most certainly do it on the Helix, and quite possibly we could even work it to work on the HX Stomp. So my goal here is to take an old Helix preset that maybe I had a lot more going on and condensing it down so it works on the Pod Go, but also even kind of modernizing or updating it. And I'll give you an example. Well, without further ado, the one I'm going to do now is my Eric Johnson-esque or Cliffs of Dover-esque tone that I did a long time ago, over 2 years ago now. Hard to believe, time's gone by. The room looked different, my face looked a little different. Hopefully, I don't know, better, worse, I don't know. And back then we were working within some limitations of the present firmware on the Helix. I was using the split crossover technique, and sometimes I had two of them going because I wanted different high and low shelves. And so things have been updated now because, in the instance of using two split crossovers, let's say, obviously forget the Stomp, right? Pod Go can't even do that. So now with the shelf EQs, for instance, we can condense this down. What took me two split crossovers to achieve in this tone, I can do with one block now, right? So I thought it'd be kind of fun to kind of go back, revisit and modernize some of the more popular tones. This is a preset that's been downloaded a couple thousand times off a custom tone. Video was viewed a lot and I had a lot of great feedback off it. So I thought, how could I get it and obviously I'm gonna be able to do everything exactly the same because of the limitations of the Pod Go and the Stomp. But I thought, let's see if we could rework it for the Pod Go. And then what I did is I recreated it again on the Helix, which in a manner that it will work on both Helix and HX Stomp for anybody who's on 2.8 firmware or beyond. So you'll find this preset on custom tone when this video posts. It'll be there for Pod Go, it'll be there for it'll look like Helix, and it is for Helix, but it should also open in HX Stomp if you have firmware 2.8 or after. All right, so let's go over to Pod Go Edit. I almost said HX Edit, old habits die hard. And we'll take a look and see what I did here. So I was trying to go for that sort of iconic violin type tone that Eric Johnson is so famous for on the Cliffs of Dover or Via Musicom album. So I went back and I took the original preset and I reworked it and tried to keep it as close as possible, but with subtle tweaks to kind of make up for the fact that some things are missing. One thing you guys will notice right away is there's no compressor at the end. That's something that's been on just about every one of my presets. I'm the first one to admit it's a very subtle glue at the end, as I've spoken about many, many times before. So if I had to let something go because of limitations, that would likely be the first thing to go, especially in a preset like this that's already distorted and it's sort of a natural compression with it. So that's what I decided. It's not because I don't want it there, not because I don't think it would be good there, but it's probably the least important aspect. So what I did do is I started with a Brit Plexi Norm amp going into a 412 Greenback 25, and we'll take a look at the settings in just a moment. With a valve driver overdrive distortion pedal before it. The wah I didn't even use, it's just part of this preset. It's not in the Helix or the HX Stomp presets. As we know in the Pod Go, it has to be there. So we'll leave it there. I have a couple EQs, one being the low and high shelf and one being a parametric, just to shape and mold the sound a little more. In the original, I think I even had a graphic EQ, just subtle twists. My whole philosophy on that is with the Helix, if you have the ability to use it and you want to just add a little tiny subtle twist to it, go ahead, it's there. But obviously on the Pod Go and the Stomp, we have limitations and we have to pick and choose more wisely, right? I have a transistor tape and I have a Hall reverb. Originally, I think I used a 63 spring verb, not enough processing power in this chain to get that working at the end. Fine, no problem. I think the Hall works as nicely. Some folks might say better. Some folks might ask why I ever used the 63 spring in the first place. I just liked it at the time, so. And then I have a volume pedal at the end. if I want to just, you know, bring up the volume or down the volume of everything here in the path. Okay, my output block I boosted by 4 dB just to get a nice signal coming out of the Pod Go. So let's take a look at what settings we do have. On the hall reverb, I have a decay of 4.7, a pre-delay of 10 milliseconds, low cut of 166 hertz, which I don't believe I touched, but I did bring the high cut back 3.9 to 3.9 kilohertz, just a touch, just to darken the reverb up a bit so it's not so splashy on the top end. Mix at 42%. All right, transistor tape set as I always do to the note sync setting, which will then, you know, the delay time will be determined by our tap tempo up here, our tempo setting of 120 beats per minute, which we can tap in on our tap tempo. Feedback fairly low, not too many repeats, just of 11%. I find this tone is dark, and, you know, it's quite possible Eric uses many more repeats than that. I don't really know. Didn't really look that closely or listen that closely to that. But I just didn't want to go much more than that to sort of muddy up the sound, right? So just a little bit of delay, probably a little bit higher mix than I normally go, but it works nice. The wow and flutter 3.6, scale at 100%, spread at 2.9. If you bump the wow and flutter up a little more and added some more spread to it, you'll get more of a stereo effect. You can adjust that to taste. This is the settings I just left. Mix at 35%, and that got me where I wanted to be. Let's go over to the amp. Well, actually, let's go to the cab. I'm using a 412 Greenback 25 with a 121 ribbon. You guys all that watch my videos all know I love ribbon mics. That's what I almost always go to, and then, you know, if it's too dark, I'll make up for it with EQ. But in this case, the darkness was kind of nice. Again, I don't know what Eric used in the original. Could have been SM57s, could have been a combination of that with ribbon mics. Could have been anything, could have been condenser mics. I don't know, I don't care. I'm just going to use what I feel will work to my ears here, right? Distance of 1 on the 121 ribbon, low and high cut off because of the EQ settings that I'll show you in a moment. And then the amp. So I went with the Brit Plexi Norm, drive on 7.7, bass on 1, mid on 1, treble on 10, presence on 5, channel volume cranked to 10 just to get more output coming out, master on 10, sag through to bias X, the deeper functions I didn't touch. I left those alone. And then I also added in the tube driver at the beginning, the valve driver, which is gain on 3.7, bass on 9, treble on 5, and the level just stayed at 6.6. All right, so let's do this. Let's turn off our reverb, turn off our delay. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Let's take a look at our EQs. So on the low and high shelf, I set the low shelf at 320 hertz, and I cut that way back 7.8 dB to kind of control the low end and the muddiness. So it's kind of funny, you know. I cranked the bass up on the overdrive pedal because I liked the kind of low end that was giving, but I was controlling all of that by pulling a lot out on the shelf below 320 hertz. The high gain, this is really funny, a lot of people might kind of scratch their head. I went to the high frequencies at 5 kilohertz, which kind of gets outside of the real realm of the meat of the guitar tone, right? A lot of the speakers, you know, kind of roll off above that anyways. But I boosted that by 12 dB, and it just gave a certain little sparkle on top without making it too grainy, okay? Because I balanced that off with the parametric EQ when I took my high cut and I put it at 12 kilohertz. So I'm kind of rolling everything off 12 kilohertz, but heavily boosting above 5 kilohertz with a shelf EQ, which would then roll off above 12 kilohertz. And again, just using my ears, that it kind of worked and added the sort of upper end presence that I wanted in the preset. And then a few more moves with the parametric EQ here. 100 hertz with a Q of 1.8, minus 2.5 dB, further controlling that low end. Mid frequencies, 1.4 kilohertz with a Q of 0.9. I pulled those way back, minus 7.8 to smooth that tone way out. And then 6 kilohertz, high Q of 3.9, and brought that back by 3.9 dB. Now it's funny, right? Because you just said, well, wait a second, you just finished boosting 12 dB above 5 kilohertz, and then you come over here and you pull the 6 kilohertz frequency back. Yes, but if you notice, I use a fairly narrow Q, which means that 6 kilohertz setting is affecting far fewer bands, EQ bands, frequencies, let's say. And I pull that back 3.9 dB. So the heavy boost on the shelf got me something, and then I kind of controlled it and just kind of molded and shaped using the EQs. And it's just like, you know, there's no rules here. You kind of use your ears, and if you boost something here, you can cut something else in that same frequency to just kind of shape and mold things, and it got me what I wanted. So let's turn those off though for now, so we can kind of hear what those actually do. So here is just the amp. Now I'm on my Yamaha Pacifica 612, love this guitar. I'm on the split coil on the humbucker, so it's simulating a single coil pickup. I know a lot of folks don't feel it really accurately represents a single coil, but it's going to work for us here. So here's just the amp with everything else turned off with these particular settings. Okay, so we hear it's kind of a lot of bottom end. Very indicative of that ribbon mic really close. And that's such a great model. I used to own a 121 ribbon mic, and it had that bottom end when miking a speaker cabinet. That you can't seem to get through EQ, right? And then you can always control that with EQ though. Okay, so that's fine. Let's do this. Let's bring in the reverb and let's hear what that does to the tone. Okay, if you wanted more, like I decided on 4.7, but if you really want me to pump that up. And again, if you wanted to even bring this back down more to get rid of some of that sparkle in the high end, you can do it, right? And now I can't remember where I had that. Let's just use our undo button here. Where did I end up? 3.9 and then 4.7. So this is where I ended up. Okay, cool. You, again, make your changes as you feel fit. Here's what happens with the transistor tape brought in. So a little higher mix than I would normally go, but the fact that I'm using less repeats is not going to allow it to kind of really muddy the sound up, right? If I had gone way up here, as I play, you sort of hear the notes kind of start stepping on one another. Back at 11%. Not so much, right? So that's where I like that. Let's bring the tube driver in. So before it, I'm liking that kind of searing violin type tone now. It's nice, but I'm finding that low end maybe a little bit out of control. So that's where our EQs come in. Let's go to our shelf EQ, and I'm going to bring that in now. Okay, here's before. Now with it. Nice, you see how it controlled the low end? With that off, hear the mud? With it on. but too much brittleness now. So that's where the parametric EQ comes in, and I kind of smooth things out with this and kind of get things back to where it's under control. So without again. And with. However that goes. I haven't played that, nor do I want to get any copyright issues, so that may have to be chopped out of the video at some point. Now I could also put a humbucker on that. I'll just take the split coil off. Right? Darkens it up a bit. If I go back to split coil. And that's the tone. So again, you guys got to remember, I'm not claiming to have copied any tone. I'm just trying to get in that ballpark. And I think for most guitarists, most players, that's going to get close enough if you want to kind of get your Eric Johnson vibe on and have some fun with it. It's a beautiful tone. Podgo, super impressive. I'm blown away by it. So go grab this, guys. It's free. It's on Custom Tone. It's there for Podgo. It's there for Helix/HX Stomp. I haven't actually tested the preset on HX Stomp. It's all on one path, under 6 blocks on the Helix. Should load up fine on your HX Stomp with software or firmware 2.8 or beyond. So hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you get some use out of this. Share the video with folks. Check in the description below for the link to Custom Tone for the presets. And like I said, I hope you really enjoyed it. Like the video, share it if you don't mind with anybody you think would get some use out of it. And subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And hit the notification bell so you get notified when I put new videos out. And I will be back very, very soon with some more content, some exciting stuff coming up. So stay tuned. Thank you guys again for the continued support. Thanks for tuning in, and ciao for now.